Okay, we're ready to get started again if the board's ready. Okay, good evening. The hour being 6:54 PM on Monday, March 13th, 2023. I'd like to call to order the Village of Brookfield Committee of the Whole meeting. Clerk Weber, can we have a roll call, please?
Let's see, Trustee Ketchmark?
Here.
Trustee Cote?
Here.
Trustee Hendricks? Here. Trustee Conroy, absent. Trustee Leclerc?
Here.
Trustee Kaluzny?
Here.
And President Garvey.
Here. Thank you. I was informed by staff that the applicant in case number 2303, a request for variation for 9428 Ogden Avenue, has withdrawn their request and did not want to be considered on the committee the whole meeting tonight, so we will skip over that request at this time. So now we'll move on to the second item, a discussion of case number 2302, request for a map amendment from B to, I'm sorry, we could, if you could keep the conversation down, the sound really kind of comes up this way, if everyone could just wait till public comment. So request for B1, zoning district for a special use permit for accessory outdoor storage located at 8800 47th Street. As always, we have a very detailed committee item with the information from the Planning and Zoning Committee, but I'm going to turn it over to our village planner, Kate Portillo, to give us a summary about the case. Thank you, Kate.
Thank you, President Garvey and honorable trustees. Case 2302 is before you today. This is a request for a map amendment from B to I1 zoning, as well as a request for a special use permit for outdoor accessory storage located at 8800 47th Street. So Mr. Jimmy Ellis has operated 24/7 plumbing at this site for approximately 8 years. And the site consists of 3 parcels, 2 of which affront 47th Street here, and 1 of which is located at the rear of the property, which is the northernmost parcel. That parcel is zoned B, and the front 2 parcels are zoned I1. The B zoning district is multifamily residential, and the parcel has been utilized for outdoor storage for upwards of 40 years, which actually predates Mr. Ellis's time at the site. Accessory use, outdoor storage as an accessory use requires a special use permit, but the village records have been absent of such authorization. Mr. Ellis recently put the site on the market and now has an interest in unified zoning and authorization for the outdoor storage area. So he made an application for a map amendment and a special use permit. You can see the current zoning designation illustrated here. So on February 23rd, the majority of the commissioners determined that the map amendment request met the standards for this type of request and issued a 4-2 vote in favor of recommending the request. And likewise, at that same public hearing, the majority of the Planning and Zoning Commission determined that the special use request met the standards of review for this type of request and voted 5-1 in favor of recommending with the conditions shown here. That concludes my report.
Thank you, Kate. Do the board members have any questions or comments related to this application?
Kate? Okay, go ahead.
No, I'm sorry.
Kate, can you talk a little bit about, I understand the B to the I1, but for the outdoor storage, if we approve that, and this is sold to another like business, I understand that. What if it's sold to something different? A different use that, wouldn't you'd have to get the approval for outdoor storage. Wouldn't you have to get the approval for outdoor storage for that particular use?
So that is an option to approach it that way because outdoor storage is an accessory use. It is not the primary use such as the plumbing business. And so I believe that the special use permit could be issued related to the property, or it could be issued in such a way that it would not authorize a different type of use.
So if it were a different use, if we approve the outdoor storage, that's outdoor storage on that particular PIN number, whatever the use is.
The code speaks to it being an accessory use in the I-1 zoning district. So a new property owner may have to come forth to request a special use
so-
for accessory storage.
So we've seen how the business is operated there now. I mean, if it's sold to a like business, we could maybe assume it's going to be operating the same way. But if it's a different business, we'd have no idea what that accessory use would be for.
So the code does still speak to standards for the general condition of outdoor storage. There might be the aspect of property code enforcement.
Okay.
I'd like to talk a little bit about the conditions that the commissioners put on there. And actually, I'll back up a little bit. There was a resident who did come to the Plan Commission, or I'm sorry, who sent a letter at the Plan Commission meeting and was concerned about the look of the property. The fencing, the storage, it's not a great look for an entrance to Brookfield, as we have lions across the street, and that was expressed at the Plan Commission meeting. So a question did come up about this fencing. The fencing has razor wire on top, and it's chain link fencing, which I believe the Plan Commission discussed is not allowed by code. So that's the reason for the condition that's placed on their recommendation. Looking for compliant fencing, which I would hope on the north property line at least would be a board-on-board or opaque fencing that's not chain link, and enhanced screening for the property lines on the east. It was pointed out by one of the commissioners as well that the standard of proof, I think that's the right wording, for a map amendment is a lot more stringent. We have to be a lot more careful when we approve that than with special use or variances, because we're changing our map forever, more or less. So that's something to consider as well.
Thank you, Trustee Hendricks. Any other questions or comments from the board?
I had a question about just the site conditions in general, and with this special use permit potentially being issued, about just kind of the other codes and standards coming up into this property. It looks like it's a pretty impervious surface across the whole site. Is there any stormwater that would have to be taken into account in this property and with asking for a special use or a map change?
So at this time, with there not being a change in ownership, that would not trigger stormwater. Future development of the site or any site in the village does.
If I could butt in again, I'm sorry. The commissioners, I left out one part. The commissioners did consider adding some kind of means of keeping the dust down as well on the property for the benefit of the neighbors, because I think that this is a gravel lot at the moment, and trucks in and out, and potentially dumping gravel could be a concern. We might want to think about that as well.
Kate, does a change in ownership trigger the stormwater? Or the change in the use or development or?
Yes, a change in the use and potential development of a site.
But I mean, if someone came in and operated the same business in the same way, that would not trigger the stormwater.
Well, the surface would not comply with code. So that would be something that would be noted in a resale inspection report.
I'm confused. On that same note, though, you had said the change in response to Trustee Kaluzny's questions, the change in ownership since there's no change in ownership, it does not trigger anything. So does a change in ownership trigger anything at that point? Because it does say to go for sale.
So the petitioner, on the public record during the public hearing, noted that there were no transactions or potential transactions at this time.
But if they do sell, that would be the change in ownership. Does that then trigger?
So commonly, when a property changes ownership and it's indicated on a resale inspection report, the two transacting parties make a determination about whose responsibility bringing the site into compliance would be.
But I'm looking at the village engineer, if there's just a change in ownership, and let's say another plumbing company buys the property and doesn't change any physical nature of the business, I don't believe the stormwater ordinance is triggered at that point.
Says the village engineer is gonna handle this. For commercial properties, the trigger would be 1,500 square feet or more. So yes, that would be noted on the resale inspection. Correct, correct.
1,500 square feet of,
Development
Something-
or resurfacing. We would work with the property owner to see that resale item that would be noted at the time of ownership transfer come into compliance per the stormwater ordinance. It may not be triggered, depending on the amount of square feet.
so if it's sold to a like business, different business, if there isn't any development above the 1,500, it would not trigger that.
It would not trigger
Right, okay.
stormwater. It would be noted on the resale inspection.
Okay, thanks.
And would they be required to pave the lot?
So, do you want to answer that?
We would definitely work with the property owner to see that come into compliance.
Thank you.
Other board members have questions? I mean, these questions are obviously very relevant, and we're going back and forth, which is fine. I just want to make sure everyone has an opportunity to have all their questions asked.
So just to be clear, right now, the only condition is changing the fencing.
That is what the commission came forward with, yes.
How does this come to a vote for us? Are there two issues, or is this together as one?
It's together as one because the accessory storage would only be allowed in the I-1 zoning district.
Well, I guess maybe we should clarify that with the village attorney. Is there one step that has to happen first? We have to allow the map amendment first to then grant a special use permit? So would it be two separate items?
Yes, the map amendment would have to take place first to rezone to I-1, which is then the special use, the accessory use of storage would be through the I-1 district.
Okay. So these could both be addressed at the same meeting, but in order of procedure, the board would have to vote to approve the map amendment first before they could grant the special use permit. Is that correct?
Correct,
And it'd be two separate votes?
yes.
Okay. I just
Well,
wanted
then, one additional question. So barring the business owner does not sell, he can continue operating as he's been operating all along. He would not need a special use on that property. Obviously, he wouldn't need the map amendment, correct?
Correct, he's been operating as a non-conforming use, but it appears that his intention is to unify the property zoning.
Right.
Upon his potential sale, but to answer your question, yes, he'd be able to continue operating as he has been.
Okay.
Thank you. Other questions, comments from the board?
I'd like to clarify one small thing. There's a typo on the slide. It says that there were 5 ayes and 1 nay, but Ms. Portillo was correct that there were 4. It was 4-2, I believe.
I
Well, one said 4 to 2,
respectfully
one said
note
1.
that on the map
inaccurate?
amendment, it was 4-2, and then one commissioner did
Oh, I'm so sorry.
vote differently on the special use.
Okay, thank you for clarifying.
Okay, other questions or comments? All right, we'll put these up in 2 weeks for a chance for the board to continue to, or additionally review the packet and take any public input that comes in between, and we'll put this up for a vote on the March 27th meeting. Okay, thank you. All right, moving on to the next item, it's discussion of case number 2304, request for a special use permit to operate a daycare, a special use permit for joint parking facilities, and for variances from Chapter 62 zoning, Article 3, off-street parking and loading of the Village of Brookfield for 9046 31st Street. Kate, will, again, same situation. Board has the access to the very detailed memo from the from staff, as well as the information from the Planning and Zoning Committee. But Kate, would you like to go ahead?
Thank you so much, President Garby and honorable trustees. Case 2304 is before you today. This is three requests, the first of which is a special use permit to operate a daycare for a daycare use. The second of special use permit is for joint parking facilities. And there is also an application for variances from the off-street parking and loading requirements of the village. This variance specifically is requesting a reduction of the on-site required parking of 19 to 15 parking spaces. This property, located at 9046 West 31st Street, is a mixed-use building. It has 2 commercial units on the first floor and 3 residential units on the second floor. The petitioner is proposing to renovate the 2 existing commercial spaces into 1 overall daycare use on the first floor. The on-site parking is illustrated here. It is located on the north side of the property in the rear of the building. What is being proposed for on-site are 7 parking spaces, one of which is ADA accessible, and the petitioner is also proposing a loading area, as all drop-off and pickup is proposed to occur from the rear of the property, where the blue rectangle indicates. I will note that all of the parking spaces the petitioner's architect drew up do meet the village code for parking space sizes, as well as village code for drive aisle width. Finally, in section 54-463 of the code, I will note that street use designations indicate that the alley north of 31st Street between Sunnyside and Park Avenues is for westbound traffic only, as the architect has also correctly indicated on this drawing. Regarding the special use permit application for proposed joint parking facilities, the applicant has entered into a preliminary agreement with the Brookfield Elks Lodge, which is located at 9022 31st Street, for shared parking, and that's specifically for 8 spaces that would be leased Monday through Friday between 6 a.m. and 6 p.m., intended primarily for the employees and potentially residents of the 9046 West 31st Street property. On February 23rd, the Planning and Zoning Commission deliberated, asked questions, and considered the standards of review for both special use permits as well as variances. They did not move to recommend approval of any of the 3 requests. I will mention that the petitioner is here this evening and does wish to make a presentation as well.
Sure. I'll leave it up to the board. Want to hear the presentation first and then open it up to questions from the board?
Yes,
Okay.
sure.
So if the applicant would like to please come up to the microphone and give us your name for the record, and then you may address the board.
Hello, my name is Pavel Chalderna. Thank you very much for allowing me to present this presentation. We are proposing a daycare. Okay, proposed parking configuration designed by a licensed architect provides 7 parking spaces, including 1 ADA. Traffic study has been done, and it shows less than 1% increase in traffic caused by an operation of this size. Parking lot includes a dedicated drop-off and pickup area to ensure safety for kids. The site has been visited by DCFS twice now. Both licensing representatives, Ms. Jasmine and as well as Ms. Chantel Sanders, determined that the location is suitable for daycare and it meets all of their necessary requirements. Ms. Sanders, that we've been working with, she's a DCFS licensing rep, evaluated nearby Candy Cane Park and also found it suitable and within a walking distance from the site. She did give us an idea, and we are planning to, if we get approved, of course, there will be an indoor playground for the kids. Once again, the DCFS determined the location is suitable, and that yellow, the highlighted spot, that shows where the indoor playground will be. The previous concerns were mainly raised in about public parking spaces next to the building. Those parking spaces have nothing to do with our applications, and we've been going over and over on traffic, which once again we did a traffic study, and it does not show. It shows that the traffic will basically be less than 1%. There will be a less than 1% increase. Before we decided to open a daycare, we consulted this with architect, traffic engineers. We ourselves also have experience with a daycare. We spend endless amount of hours researching, and we know there's a need for a quality daycare in the area, and we do want to provide one. We went over and beyond to make everyone happy, found resolution to basically every problem that was brought our way. We are willing to reduce the number of kids if that's necessary. Thank you very much.
If you could just, does the board members have any questions of the applicant at this time? I just thought I'd keep you up here in case they have questions of the applicant. We'll have questions to staff, or if you want to direct questions to staff also at the same time.
One question at this point, what is the plan for the alley then? If it's a one-way westbound, is it all going that way, or is this actually going against the traffic of the alley?
The traffic is shown on that diagram to go westbound.
Okay, and that's the way the whole alley is? No. Right, that's what I'm asking.
So at this time, there's no code reference that staff was able to locate indicating that the direction of that alley goes in two directions, although that did come up at the public hearing.
But right now, it is an eastbound alley.
There is signage of both sorts, it appears, posted at that alley. It's hard for me to say when that occurred.
Okay, but right now, if we were to drive out there, we would assume it is an eastbound alley, correct?
At a portion of, in the middle, at a portion of that alley.
And then this part, what's being proposed here, would actually go counter to that for...
So the code authorizes the westbound traffic.
And if I can say something, and the sign that's there showing eastbound, it's actually from the exit from the parking lot on. So as you exit the parking lot, as it was showing on the picture, going west, if I might approach, I can point where the sign is.
We
don't have anything in the code and we've got signs pointing in both directions in that alley, would it make sense to either remove both of them for the sake of public safety?
The hearing did bring to light a discrepancy that we don't have an explanation for, and we can work with Public Works to correct that.
Well, I think no matter what we do, we should, I mean, we typically codify directions in alleys in terms of one-way and things like that, is my past experience. So if there's nothing on the record independent of this application, we should clear that up and designate it, whether it's a eastbound or westbound alley, and it probably, again, independent of this case, should be consistent all the way through the alley, but that's kind of separate from this. Either way, that should be brought forward, so. I'm sorry, if, again, the rest of the board, any questions of the applicant or staff at this time?
Just for clarity, again, the parking spaces I know which are not part of this application, but the parking spaces that are public on that street, they are 1 hour parking?
Yes, they are codified as 1 hour parking.
Thank you. And the signage, does that reflect that?
It's consistent, yes.
Thank you.
Okay, other questions or comments from the board at this time? I believe is there some people in the audience that would like to, that are here specifically in this case? We're going to have a chance for general public comment at the end of the committee of the whole, but is there anyone in the audience that would like to address the board on this particular topic at this time? Just wanted to give an opportunity. Would you like to? Sir, if you could just have a seat in the front row
Thank
just in
you.
case you want to, and I appreciate you coming out tonight. Ma'am, if we could, I'm just trying to make it, I recognize some people being here. If you would like to make a comment or have a question.
Well, my name is Susan Jones, and I know you also might have a statement from my husband who's out of town currently. I just wanted to state, because I did go to the property, because we're at 9106, so we're like right across, sorry, don't.
Park.
Thank you. I'm not from Brookfield, so I apologize. And I did check today just to make sure, and that one-way sign is right when you come out of that parking lot, that it's right in front of your face to go to the east. So, and the only other thing that we're concerned about is that it gets very hectic around that corner. People are coming down that street to avoid the red light, coming at high speeds. We're also concerned about, if one of the commissioners from the last meeting stated, if somebody's coming north and somebody's coming south and people are coming out the exit, you've got 3 lanes of traffic fighting there to get in and out. And the backup, like, I would turn left into the alley behind our building. I'm not guaranteed at what time I'm coming at, if I'm even going to be able to pull in to get to our parking lot if we've got traffic coming from 3 different directions. So that was all that I wanted to say.
Thank you. And we did receive written comments from Paul Jones from the address related to this. The board has been given copies of that, so.
Okay, yeah,
Okay,
so,
thank you. Okay. Is there anyone else here that wants to comment on this particular application on 31st Street?
I have a question, maybe back for the applicant. I'm sorry to bring you back up, just looking at this again. Is it determined that the daycare staff would come out and get kids from the car, or the parents aren't parking first and then bringing their children inside? What is the procedure? I'm just curious.
There's actually enough room
how much this flow
for at least
matters.
2 cars to park and drop off, and then, yes, we can have a staff actually getting the kids from the car, or parents can just park for, it doesn't take more than 5 to 10 minutes to drop off a kid and pick it up. Once again, the daycare has probably about maybe 30, 35 kids at the most. It's not like school where you have a constant traffic. So kids are being dropped off anywhere from 6 in the morning to about 10 in the morning, so it does spread out. I don't see a traffic being there, and we did the traffic study, and it does not show that there's going to be an impact in traffic there. And if people are cutting through, doing a shortcuts, I think a simple speed bump would resolve the problem. but that's kind of out of our hands. if
Thank you.
someone-
I guess I'm curious back to Kate too, how the flow of traffic through here matters that much to this application. And I'm sorry if I'm missing it, because if I'm dropping off a kid for daycare, I'm getting out, I'm bringing them in, and I'm leaving whatever direction you're supposed to leave.
I believe that part of this diagram, and maybe the petitioner would prefer to answer this, but they previously made an application to the Planning and Zoning Commission that was withdrawn. And my understanding is that this more specific plan was in response to some of the past feedback. And other than that, there are a number of alleys in Brookfield that are in the code as one-way directional.
My guess is in this case, I was not aware that this alley was designated by code as a one-way alley. I would imagine, and I think the petitioner verified this, the sign that says one way is on private property. So I'm guessing that the previous owner of this property just put that up there. Carl, I mean, I'm not aware that we have too many one-way alleys, certainly not in this area. So I'm guessing that whatever the previous owner's desires were, that person wanted to make this one-way, but I will bet you dimes to donuts, there's no ordinance that says that's a one-way alley, as has already been verified. There's no way we would do one-way for just one property width, and the rest would be two-way. That doesn't make any sense.
Sure,
So,
but either way, if you were leaving, if the sign was one way, then you'd turn out the alley that way and
right,
leave and go out towards Oak, correct?
you would think so.
Or whatever the next street down.
I think we should look into if there is one way. I do believe there's other, I know there's other instances of where there's one-way signs in alleys. In fact, the alley that's just west of there, just west of Park on 31st Street, between Park and Bartlett there is a one-way designation. I mean, I think there are narrow alleys, and there is a one-way sign that I walk past every morning that designates a direction, one-way direction in that
For the
alley.
entire stretch of the alley?
I can't say I've been down the whole alley. I'm just trying to picture the businesses that are there, and there's apartment buildings and stuff, so I don't know. But again, separate from this application, we need to probably make that determination and may want to designate alleys a specific direction for traffic flow because they are narrow and in terms of people potentially using alleys to avoid traffic on 31st Street or other streets. I think it's, again, kind of off topic for here, but I think it's somewhat relevant. If there is not any designation for this alley, we need to come up with something, and then we have to look at codifying it in some way, so.
Sure.
President Garvey,
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
thinking back, where is the, what used to be Brunetti's?
That's the Elks.
The Elks?
Right.
Is that on the opposite side? Maybe this was put into place then when you had all the traffic from the
The banquet.
banquet halls and that, so it would go directly out to the street to the east instead of going westbound through everything else and down through the alleys.
Yeah.
And again, maybe that was done just by whoever back then. But I mean, when the Elks was, I mean, it was a banquet hall. I mean, there would be a lot of traffic there for that then.
I mean, I have more questions. It seems like the daycare meets the standards for DCFS, so it's meeting the standards for the app, for what it's being asked to do, but there's just, is the concern from the zoning commission just about the parking?
I think that there were a number of concerns brought up at the Plan Commission meeting. A number of residents came, and yes, they were very, very concerned about the parking, and the other business owners along 31st were very concerned about the parking. That said, this plan that they're putting before us doesn't ask to use the public parking. And the public parking is, it is for everyone, for all of those businesses. I know that in the previous application, the commissioners were concerned about circulation through the parking lot. It didn't have circulation. It was a pull-in try to turn around and pull back out. And that was a bigger concern for the commissioners because of safety and conflicts with kids and people moving through there. I believe that the diagram showing the circulation is to show that they have, I believe, removed a couple of parking spaces in
Correct.
order to provide circulation through that would be safer
And we-
for
We hired an architect
the
to
users.
design this.
if that's helpful.
I think that's helpful. I'm sorry, I'm dominating the questions.
You're fine.
Other questions, comments from the board? For staff, the applicant, or? Okay. All right, well, again, we'll put this up on the meeting of the 27th for a vote. There was not a positive recommendation from the Planning and Zoning Commission, so it would require a supermajority of the board, or, so is that, and if you could clarify, I don't want to put you on the spot, is that how many trustees would have to vote in favor of it to overrule the Planning and Zoning Commission?
You'd need, if everybody was present, at least 5.
So 5 of,
Sorry.
no, that's what I'm trying, and does it involve,
Trustees or the board?
is it the corporate authorities of the board?
Authorities, right, the supermajority.
Of the corporate authorities, or, okay, I think we'll need to clarify that before the meeting. I don't want to put you on the spot because you're here tonight covering for Adam, but I know it's come up in the past whether the ordinance says a supermajority or a supermajority of the board of trustees or a supermajority of the corporate authorities, where my vote would possibly be involved. So we'll need to clarify that, but let's give everyone a chance on the board to continue to review this, take any public input. I know everyone's kind of gone by the site once before, at least once before. Take a look at it, and then we'll bring this back and vote on it on the 27th. Okay? Thank you for coming out
Thank
tonight.
you.
Thank you for the present. I'm sorry, there's someone in the back. Would you I'm sorry, I opened it up early, but if you'd like to come up and make comment about this matter, just ask you to state your name for the record, please.
Good evening. My name is Christina Labrizzi. I'm actually one of the residents there at the proposed building site with the parking issues. I've been there at the numerous meetings that have been held for zoning and in the village, and I actually came to the last meeting where the actual proposal was withdrawn. So I have a strong interest in this issue. My issue is that in the first meeting that we attended, all the residents did go, and we stated our concern about our parking spaces, because I found out that we're supposed to have 2 parking spaces per unit that lives there. After we voiced our concerns, we all of a sudden, by surprise, mid-February, received a new lease, of course, with a rent increase. But what surprised us was, out of nowhere, each one of our units had a parking space taken away. And it felt very much like a form of retaliation for what we came out and voiced our concerns about. Now, I'm not sure of the others, how much it affected them, but for myself and my husband, we are both working people. We have full-time jobs, 5 days a week, where it is involved where we need to have both of our cars. We are caregivers of elderly parents. One of our parents is in Romeoville, another one's in Melrose Park. So at any given moment, we do have to be on the lookout to be able to go see our parents and take care of them. I work pretty far, and sometimes when I come back, it's pretty late. Where am I supposed to park? And I feel like this plan is really lacking any kind of resolution to that. And then, if anything, I feel like we got punished for voicing our concerns about it, along with our fellow community business members and residents that were there. And I feel it very unfair. And it's really sad that we've had a very lack of communication from anyone concerning this issue. So that is all I wanted to say, and I do agree, it is a very dangerous area to have such a business at. When I'm getting ready in the mornings, between the hours of 6 to 8, it varies on the day, I can count at least 5 different cars speeding down that side street constantly within half an hour. That is very scary, and I can't even imagine kids being dropped off and parents being able to get in and out of there easily. Thank you.
Thank you. I did have a question that came up about the parking request to have spaces at the Elk Lodge, and it indicated there was a proposed agreement to lease certain spaces during certain hours. And I thought I heard the comment that those spaces were going to be primarily for employees and residents of the residential?
That is what the applicant represented, yes.
Okay. But I mean, if they're limited to Monday through Friday from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m., they're only leasing them from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m., how could they be included as spaces for the residents?
And a block away.
The petitioner may want to respond to that, but my understanding of that would be that during the operating hours of the daycare, some of the spaces would be utilized for the for their clientele.
If the applicant would like, so I guess I'm asking the question of, you have spaces now that are behind the existing building that are currently used from some of your residential tenants upstairs, and that these new spaces that you're indicating that you're going to lease at the Elks Lodge, are they meant to replace some of the residential spaces behind your building?
There are enough residential parking spaces behind for the unit tenants to have two for each one of them. There are 3 apartments, so each one will get 2, and employees will park on Elk Lodge parking lot. And the reason it's 6 a.m. to 6 p.m.
Sir, please, you'll get a chance to come up and make comments if you'd like to. Please don't interrupt. So I'm sorry, go ahead.
The business hours of the daycare will be 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. That's why the lease with Elks, it's only from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. And also, just want to respond to, no one punished anyone. Me, myself, I'm also renting the space from the building owner, so they wouldn't be able to punish anyone.
So can you explain, so this diagram shows the proposed parking, the number of spaces there, I show, is it 5 spaces, 6 spaces there?
Correct.
Okay, and if you have 3 apartments and each apartment has 2 parking spaces?
They will occupy those 6 parking
Those 6
spots.
spaces, so there'll be none of those spaces would be for the daycare use?
The
village didn't, that wasn't a part of the application, how the parking was allowed.
No, I understand, but I'm just trying to clarify, because when I heard the leasing of the other spaces would be for employees and, so if these 6 spaces are currently assigned to or per lease dedicated to your residents, you're also counting them towards the 15 spaces that you're asking for?
Correct.
So if the residents in your apartments are home during the day and they're parked in those spaces, it seems like it seems like they're being double counted. They're allowed for your residents can use them. They're assigned to them in a lease. So if they happen to be working from home and there's all 3 residents, all 3 apartments with 2 cars each are home, there's 6 cars there from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. Where are the other spaces for beyond the 8 that you're looking to lease at the Elks Lodge?
There are 7 parking spaces there. We took some parking spaces in order to put the dedicated drop-off and pickup area for the kids, for the safety of the kids. And there are 8 parking spaces leased from Elks for employees, basically.
I understand, but my understanding of the variation request is there was 19 parking spaces are supposed to be required for your type of business. You asked for an amendment down to, from 19 to 15, 8 of them which would be at the Elks Lodge. I'm missing, where are the other 7?
They're right here, behind the building.
The same 7 that your residents have leases?
Just to clarify, these aren't his residents.
No, I know, but the residents, the building owner has leased those spots out to those 7 people also.
Yeah, so the total of 19, that includes 6 parking spaces for the residents.
President Garvey, in the memo, it says 13 are required for the daycare.
13 are required for the daycare, so it's the residents upstairs and the amount, so 13.
And once again, we are willing to reduce the number of kids to actually need even less parking.
Okay. I was just trying to clarify the, the application and the request for my own thoughts, so, okay. Other questions or comments from the board?
Are we allowed to put a condition on this that might specify who parks where? That this is resident parking behind the building and employee parking at the Elks Lodge?
That is an opportunity of a special use permit, yes.
Thank you.
Well, I'd ask the village attorney to weigh in, because if the tenants upstairs aren't impacted by this application, and depending on what their leases say for these spots, I don't think this use could have an impact on a lease that a residential person would have over those parking spots. Correct me if I'm wrong, Tom, but.
No, you characterized it correctly. I'm not familiar with where the residential spots are with this property, but the special use would not impact the residential use.
Yeah, this zoning action can impact an existing legal lease that those tenants may or may not have. I have no idea what those leases say about these parking spaces, but that at
Okay,
least have
so
one.
It wouldn't necessarily impact the lease, but could we specify as a condition that the parking at the Elks Lodge and the shared parking is for employees and for the daycare?
That would be between, I guess, the lease or the agreement the Elks Lodge would have with the applicant or the business at.
But if it's, I'm sorry, if it's a condition of the special use.
Correct. That is something that could be done.
But I think this came up when we talked about this, about the previous applicant, Ogden. How would the enforcement aspect of that go? I mean, if we're saying that the employees are the ones that have to park at the Elks Lodge, if it was permitted, does the village have the ability and the means or desire to enforce that? Or, I mean,
Only if we had an agreement with the property owner. Can we enforce any type of parking regulation on private property?
Okay.
So if that was a condition the board wanted to place,
That's right there.
you would have to, the staff would have to come back to you and say, yes, we have a deal with the Elks Lodge to allow us to enforce that, or if they did not allow us to, then we could not enforce it.
Okay. Other questions, comments from the board? All right, thank you, everyone, for the comments. The board will review this, and we'll vote on it on the meeting of the 27th. I'm sorry, was there anyone else? There's a gentleman, did you want to say something? Again, if we could just have your name for the record, please.
Hi, Board President. My name is Mario Labrizzi. I'm a tenant at the building, like my wife that just spoke earlier. First, I want to apologize for my outburst.
That's okay.
This has been a hot button topic for us. I'm kind of disappointed that my other tenants in the building haven't been representing themselves here quite as much as my wife and I have, but that's neither here nor there. I will, for one personally, would be happy to see some business in the building. Since the antique store closed, it's been vacant there, and we get a lot of unscrupulous people showing up, parking in the parking lot for no reason, doing who knows what. I assume they figure it's an empty space, so that no one's going to pay attention and do any check from them back there. So it'll be good to have some business and some activity in the building. Other than the concerns that my wife brought up, I think in general the way that, and I don't blame the petitioner either, since he's just trying to rent a space in the same building, but the actual owners of the property haven't really been forthcoming with us as tenants to kind of explain what he would like to do with the building. The only way we've been finding out is by coming to these meetings and the zoning and commissioning board meetings. And then there's also the fact of, we did receive that lease amendment or rider at the end of January of this year, asking us to rescind usage of one of our parking spots, which I'm not even sure is legal or possible based off of whatever code or rules that the village may have, or Cook County or whomever. So it just seemed really sketchy, for lack of a better term. I like the idea that someone did bring up about designating the parking spots in the back of the building there for who's for employees and who is not. I think that would go a long way in helping to make that situation a little easier for us. But that's really all of my concerns. It's just a matter of getting the lines of communication going and understanding that, you know, other people's lives are impacted too. And it's not necessarily, you know, we're not necessarily against a business there, like in my opinion, but we just want to see everything done in the right way that's kind of fair to everybody. So.
When you mentioned the lines of communication your wife did, I mean, are you referring with yourself and the building owner?
And the building owner,
okay.
right. It's not anything that any of you could help specifically,
Okay.
but yeah, that's where I was going with that.
I just wanted to clarify that because
Sure.
I think the notices and the information and the public meetings we've had have all been open, and we appreciate the communication and people reaching out.
Right, and again, it's not the petitioner's fault either. He's just trying to establish his business so that he knows that he can move forward with what he wants to do.
Yes.
It's just unfortunate that there's three parties here and we're not all working in sync, so.
Okay.
I
Thank you.
appreciate your time.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Okay. Yes, sir?
Good evening. I'd just like to give a brief historical.
I know we know who you are, but could you please state it for the
Okay.
record?
Jim Mann.
Thank you.
Village manager here between 80 and 2000. I'd like to give a brief historical perspective during that period, 80 to 2000. I have no idea how interpretations have been made either by the village board or by staff after that period. However, during that period, the village originally had a parking ordinance that required 1.5 parking spaces per dwelling unit. Didn't make any difference where those dwelling units were located. They were supposed to have 1.5 spaces. The village board by ordinance then extended that number to 2, realizing that what can you do with a half parking space? It was very difficult to try to determine were they to be for guests, were they for the occupants or what? There was never made any mention as far as a lease and the property owner having any right of a lease that would go beyond the ordinance to exempt that ordinance requirement to him providing parking spaces at the number of 2 per dwelling units as was required and as was provided. Now, if the property lacked 2, then in effect the property was grandfathered in, so it was assumed that those spaces up to what would have been a maximum of 2 per dwelling units would have been retained. Anything else after that would have been for any other use on that property.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Okay. Yes, sir? Again, if we could have your name for the record, please.
Steve Sabern. One of the other things that was mentioned at the public hearing for this petition was that with the reserved parking that was going to be at the Elks Lodge, it was made mention that many activities are taking place during the day at the Elks Lodge, and the reserved parking should actually be indicated within that Elks Lodge parking lot, you know, like no parking between these signs or reserved parking between these signs for those dedicated parking spaces to be used by the daycare center. The other thing is, if you were to look at your Google Street View maps, you can see off of Sunnyside, there's a do not enter sign from Sunnyside going west along that alley. And then you have one-way signs pointing east when you're exiting or going north out of the parking lot of the Elks Lodge, and it's pointing you to the east as well. So that circulation that they're proposing is taking them contrary to what we've got laid out with the signs that are within that alley. Thank you.
Thank you. Other comments, public comments at this time? Based on the public comment, any additional questions or comments from the board? Okay. Again, we'll put this up on the 27th, and I know the board will take their time and review it, so thank you.
President Garvey, if I could, sorry, if I could go back to the previous, the 47th Street for one question for the attorney.
Sure.
If the business owner sells it to a like business, is a special use required for the outdoor storage, or does that go with that business?
The special use would run with the land, so.
No, I mean, right now, it's a
It's a-
non-conforming use.
Right.
So if that business
Oh.
sells it to a like business, is that still a non-conforming use? Or would that new business, which if I'm saying is a like business, would they require a special use for that
The new
outdoor
business,
storage?
I believe, would require a special use, even if it's a like use. It's a different owner, change in ownership.
Okay.
Would trigger the need for a special use permit.
Okay.
For accessory for outdoor storage.
Okay, thanks.
All right, thank you. Any other questions or comments of the board? Anything we've covered so far? We have one more item. Okay, thank you. The next item is a discussion regarding staff's recommendations for undertaking 2 water main improvement projects during the 2023 construction season. Again, very detailed memo, but Derek Trikel, our village engineer, is here to make a presentation and summarize the proposal.
What do I do to click it? Yeah. Good evening. We're here tonight. We want to discuss 2 water main projects that have been on the village's radar, but we did not present at the time the budget was prepared back in the fall of '22. The first project is a project that includes replacing the water main on Du Bois Boulevard from Ogden north to Burlington, and also 1 block of water main on Burlington from Du Bois to Deo. This water main was part of the initial group of water mains that we entered into a design engineering contract back in the fall as part of the IEPA low-interest loan. And the thought was that we could get this done possibly in late fall of '23 or in '24 as part of the low-interest loan project. As we've continued to work with the IEPA, it's become evident with the construction schedule that the earliest we would be able to undertake these water main improvements would be October of '23, and that's only if we are awarded funding with the low-interest loan. There's a chance that we don't get funding this first year we apply. It's critical that we do replace this water main prior to the start of the Burlington Avenue Improvements Project, which is scheduled to start in March or April of '24. If you could click the slide. This is a highlighted, a blown-up view of where the water main replacement is. So we're currently under contract for this project, so the design has been ongoing. It's approximately 80% done. We're asking the village board to consider funding this for construction for this fall to make sure we could get the water main replaced and not have it dependent on whether or not we get the funding from the IEPA. We prepared a estimate of cost, and again, I mentioned the design engineering is already under contract and budgeted, but the construction and construction engineering for this section of water main replacement is estimated at $655,000. We have a second section of water main replacement, and I'd like to go into a little bit of background. So this is the intersection of Prairie, Grand, and Brookfield Avenue, and I think you may all be aware that we hired a contractor last December to come out and do a repair. This actually started back in, thank you, yes, where Tim's floating the cursor, and this actually started back in 2018 when the 6-inch water main that runs north-south beneath the tracks, there was a break, and it was actually beneath the tracks where we couldn't excavate and repair. So at the time, what was done is on the south side of the tracks, the water main was cut and capped. In other words, there was no more feed to the 6-inch towards the north side. And on the north side of the tracks, we ended up closing. It ended up taking 7 valves to be closed up on the north side to prevent water from flowing through that water main that runs beneath the tracks. So that effectively stopped the leak, but we had 7 valves closed on the north side of the tracks, which left some one-way feeds. We In the late fall of '22, we had a business development on Grand that wasn't getting the fire flow readings that they desired, and we felt that it should be higher readings if this was a loop system. It was determined that there was just a one-way feed, so we went out to try and cut and cap that 6-inch water main on the north side of the tracks. Again, it involved traffic control. It's right in the southbound traffic. And while they did cut and cap that 6-inch, when they opened the valves on the north side of the tracks, we again had a leak. So there's one of two options. We're not sure, but something's going on that isn't reflected on the water main atlas that we have. There's either another water main that crosses beneath the tracks, or there's a connection to that 6-inch water main that between the two ends that are capped that's providing pressure. So we shut down one of the valves on the north side of the tracks just west of the 6-inch, and that stopped the flow through there. But that's not a permanent solution to this problem. We've been working with staff since then. If you look at the layout on here, this is the village's what we call the original water main atlas that's been maintained since the 30s. It shows that these water mains just aren't laid out in a logical fashion. There's actually some redundant water mains that I'm not sure why they got installed in this manner, but this wouldn't be how you would design this connection right now. And of course, since most of these water mains that you're seeing lie right out in the middle of that intersection as it crosses the tracks, they're very difficult to maintain, especially if we have a water main break. So if you could go to the next one. What we've proposed is come through, and we want to make a few connections. So I'll start with on the far left over on Fairview. That connection's currently out in the middle of the intersection. We're proposing to provide a new connection on the west side of the intersection. It'll be new pipe. We don't expect any maintenance for the next 30 to 50 years minimum, but it also, if we ever do need to get at those valves or replace that pipe, it would not require shutting down the railroad tracks. I'll go to the far east connection, and that's a similar, right there. And same thing, that connection is currently out in the middle of the intersection. We're proposing to make a tap east of the intersection and connect to that 6-inch water main that runs east to Forest Avenue. And then lastly, the middle connection, we're proposing to leave this connection because that's the 6-inch that runs north on Prairie. We'd tap into at the south end to the 16-inch and then run new 8-inch pipe north approximately to where that existing fire hydrant is on Prairie Avenue. And as part of that connection, we would also tie in the water main on Grand. So even though that main, some of it would still be out in the intersection, it would be new ductile iron pipe water main. Again, we estimate you're going to get 50 years or more of service without any need to go out there and repair the water main. We did prepare an estimate of costs. Estimate is for construction and engineering is $606,000. And we're suggesting that we go out to bid on both of these projects this year and try to get construction done on both of these projects. Rough time frame, if the board does choose to move forward with this, is we would, if we're authorized on March 27th, we'd have design during April, May, open bids in June, award in July, and then construction could take someplace between August and October. I did talk to Emily. I know we have the bike event. That was that June? Am I remembering?
July.
July. We would not be ready for construction prior to July. I know there's some other events out there. I should mention the work up on Ogden, on Brookfield Avenue, Prairie, and Grand. That's about a 4-week shutdown of the tracks, and it would include a full detour for traffic during that time. And since we have traffic detoured as part of the restoration, rather than patching all of it, The area that's in the intersection, internal to the brick paver sidewalks and running up towards the railroad tracks, we would, rather than just resurface the patches, we would resurface that entire area so we wouldn't have to come back there for 20 years with a resurfacing project. So in conclusion, we're looking for permission to go out for bid on these two projects this year.
Questions, comments from the board?
Derek, does the Du Bois and Burlington water main play into what potential development we have over there in terms of the sizing or that of it?
It would, in the estimate we've done, I went with the conservative sizing of increasing it to a 12-inch, but we would go ahead and do the sizing. Part of it's dependent on the type of development, which we're
But this
we're
would
not
be
certain.
happening most likely before that.
It would.
Right.
It would. So we could put in the 12 inches, the conservative design would be an approach. I would talk more to staff to see if we have any better idea on what we expect may come there
But
eventually.
a 12-inch main would accommodate just about any contemplated type of use.
Yes,
Well,
thank you.
thinking back, I mean, if you go back 3-4 years, some of the potential development we were looking at over there might have been 80 units or something like that. I mean, is this sufficient for that?
12-inch certainly would be, and quite frankly, a 12 is the largest main we have. Increasing it more than that wouldn't provide much extra flow because we have a 12-inch on Ogden that we're connecting to. The 12 is the largest main that we would put in on there, and yes, I do feel it would be. I will say, so we did our water main system hydraulic study. I didn't mention it, jumping around a little, I apologize, but when we looked at that 6-inch water main crossing under the tracks, it was found that it was redundant. We have 4 12-inch crossings in town, and they provide pressure to the south end of town fine without that 6-inch crossing, so we can abandon that. When we also did that hydraulic study, the 12-inch is what we were looking at installing on Du Bois. We actually had considered augering it under the tracks to a 12-inch on Southview, which is quite an expense. Since that time, a few years ago, there was a proposed development that came in, and that might be the 80 unit you're talking about, and they indicated that they were going to sprinkle it, and B&F Technical came in with a much lower fire flow demand, which would allow that 12-inch to certainly feed it. Matter of fact, an 8-inch might even be sufficient. If this is approved, we would go ahead and work with B&F Technical on what we think the maximum development for that site is and size the water main accordingly.
And then what about in terms, I mean, that's a collector route. I mean, we're set to be resurfacing that, what, 24? Or
24, yes.
so does that play into is this under the walk still, or is this?
Yes, the new water main we anticipate would go under the east sidewalk on Du Bois and under the south sidewalk. And part of that is we're actually reconstructing that section of Du Bois, so digging out the base and all of the existing pavement. Typically, we like to consider moving the mains, replacing those mains as part of a reconstruct. We're suggesting we get it done ahead of time, not part of that federally funded project.
Okay, thanks.
How many residential houses are right there on Du Bois at that section? And do we know if they're running lead?
I do not at this point, and I don't have exact number. I want to say on Du Bois there could be a half dozen, and I think there's 3-4 more on the south side of Burlington. Right, so we'll determine whether those are, and I just haven't, at this preliminary stage, contacted PW to find out if those are lead services. If we replace the main, the lead services will be installed all the way into the house, and if they are copper services, we still put a new copper service from the main to the B box and then reconnect to their copper
And then
service.
for the ones that we have to replace, if we're replacing them and the line has to be increased in size, they have to get a new meter. Are we responsible for that meter?
I don't know. I would defer to, I don't know. We haven't had that come up on the We haven't typically replaced these into the house before, so when we install one in services, this just, I think the reason trustee Cote is asking is because this came up at our public
Right.
meeting at 5:30. We can look into that and get back to the board with a
Okay,
response.
and then the estimate in here could increase because we don't know if we have to replace any lead line.
I assumed that they were, I went with the conservative estimate. I
Okay.
assumed they're all gonna be lead, so if any are copper, it should come down from this amount.
So the 1.261
Yes,
contemplates replacing service lines, lead service lines?
yes.
Okay.
Those are, the current cost is based on full service replacement from the main into the house at the meter.
Just to circle back to the first thing you said too, the IEPA grant, is that completely off the table? Or could we still apply for that and it could help fund one of these two projects? Or is that not the case?
It wouldn't be, so March 31st, we just had a public meeting on this, and then we'll receive comment for 10 days. But the project plan that we submitted did not include the water main work at Brookfield, Prairie, and Grand, so that cannot be added at this time. It did include this. The schedule is we submit March 31st. We find out sometime in June whether we're on what they call the intended funding list. If we did find out we were on the intended funding list, the EPA has some lengthy advertisement, 45 days, and they also have, after award, it takes 45 days for them to review the financial documents. Long story short, the earliest we could start construction would be October. There is a chance that if we find out in June that we are on the intended funding list, we could choose to do the water main on Burlington and Du Bois as a project, as part of that entire project that we're designing. And there's no risk or cost to the village because we're already under design for that, as well as I think there's 8 other sections of Maine. It'd just be which project we packaged it up with and went out to bid. So we can keep that open as an option.
Thank you. Thanks for clarifying, I appreciate it.
And I take it otherwise, Doug, we have the 1.26 million? All right, other questions or comments from the board? No. Okay, so, I mean, what's the action needed here? Is there a resolution that would be needed, or just a consensus from the board to go ahead with these 2 water main projects?
We would bring a design engineering agreement to you. It'd probably be addendum to the initial agreement. I'll bring it to the March 27th meeting. It'll only be for the water main at Grand, Brookfield, and Prairie. And we'd ask to add that to the design engineering agreement. So just an addendum to that agreement, the original agreement.
Any other questions or comments from the board?
No.
Okay, thank you very much, Derek. Okay, that ends the items we have up for regular business. At this point, I will once again open up the meeting to public comment. Is there anyone on the right side that has any public comment? Okay, hearing none, is there anybody on the left side that has any public comment? Barb, would you like to come up to the microphone, please?
Barbara Dom, 4513 Park Avenue. I was originally here for the property on 9428 Ogden, and since that kind of got shelved, I thought I'd sit in for the rest of the meetings. And it's not that I'm probably not telling you something you already know, but from what I'm seeing, you know, with the discussion on Ogden Avenue and the one on 31st and the one on 47th, a common denominator is parking. And I think somewhere along the lines, you know, the board or somebody, the village staff, needs to really start looking at some type of a plan to provide parking. You know, you can't expect businesses to come in and then, you know, they're asking for some kind of a variance for off-street parking, that they don't have enough space. We need to help new businesses and existing businesses that are coming into town, no matter where in town, and help them by having some type of parking. Now, whether we, the town needs to have something on their wish list of being able to maybe buy up property when it's for sale to create a lot, but we need to do something. And the other thing that I wanted to mention is when I was at the Planning Commission meeting, both the owner as well as the prospective tenant at the 9428 Ogden, they were both there to see what needs to be done, see how they could cooperate to get what would need to be approved to get all their requests. Now, this gentleman here on 31st, it makes you wonder, where is the owner? Why isn't he helping him to create a business in his vacant storefront? So there's something not right. And I would have to say that I agree with Jim Mann, because that was the other issue. I'm a landlord. I know I have to provide 2 off-street parking spots for every single apartment. And for a landlord to tell his tenant, you can only have 1, no, that's not how it works here, at least not in Brookfield. So as far as looking into going along or giving him his various permits on 31st, I would have to say no from my standpoint. The other thing is too that was discussed at our Planning Commission was the concept of shared parking. And it was brought up in conjunction with the place on Ogden Avenue, because he said, well, across the street, what used to be, what was that, Tony's Restaurant, I think it was, years ago, the Italian restaurant, he'll have parking over there. The commission said, okay, what happens if a business comes in or the property is sold and you cannot, park there? Well, then it was like, well, I don't know. But for now, this is what I have. We need to consider that too, that when somebody says, well, I can allow my employees to park 2 doors down in that parking lot during certain hours, what happens when that changes? Just like one gentleman had said, that there's functions going on and they may need those parking spaces. And what are you gonna do? Are you gonna say you can't park between this sign and that sign? Who's gonna enforce it? Quite frankly, I go to a parking spot and when I see over at Kohl's, oh, this is for the employee of the month and it's empty. Obviously, there's no employee of the month. I park there. I don't park in the handicap, and I don't park in the veteran spot, over at Home Depot, but anything else that says employee of the month, hey, if there's no employee of the month parking there, I'm parking there. And I would have to say the same thing in another parking lot. Unless if you're gonna put a fence and put a lock gate on it and whatnot, I'd park there. If there's no other place to park, I'd park there. Now, of course, when I go to the fish fry over here on Ogden Avenue on the 1st of the month, I know better than to park on the residential street. Where I'm parking now, I guess I get away with it. I won't tell you where I'm parking. But, but bottom line is somewhere down the road a piece, the village and a committee has to come up with some long-term ideas as to how we can help businesses and their parking issues. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, Barb. That's happened, and you're right. You're telling us something we do know. We've already been working on that in various sites. We've actually added parking in some places and designing things and looking for parking. So it's a economic development issue. It's a financial issue, but we're dealing with the applications we have in front of us. But it's definitely on staff's radar and the board's radar. So thank you.
Very good. Thank you.
Thanks, Barb. Anyone else on my left? Yes, sir.
Steve Saburn. This was in regards to the property at 8800 47th Street. One of the last things that I'd want to be a proponent of is to have additional impervious surface within the village But when looking at that property, not only today, but at the time that they had the public hearing with the Planning and Zoning Commission, that property in the rear is all gravel, and you are always seeing gravel and dirt that is being carried out across the sidewalk, the apron, and into the street on Custer. And I would just hope that this being a special use request, that perhaps the village board would look into adding another condition that would help alleviate that problem, such as paving the drive aisles that are exiting the property instead of paving the entire property, so that as they're exiting, the debris is coming off of the trucks before it leaves the property, and then they can do their cleanup on a daily basis, and it's not coming out to the street, into the sidewalk or the apron. So, perhaps an additional condition can be considered. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Okay, hearing none. Tim, any need for executive session? Nope. Okay, thank you. So at 8:14 PM, I'd entertain a motion to adjourn the committee of the whole meeting.
So moved.
Second.
The motion was made by trustee Kaluzny, second by trustee Hendricks. Roll call, please.
Trustee Ketchmark?
Aye.
Trustee Cote?
Aye.
Trustee Hendricks?
Aye.
Trustee Leclerc?
Aye.
Trustee Kaluzny?
Aye.
Motion passes.
Okay, we're adjourned at 8:15 PM.